Okay guys, today we're going to be focusing on painting gold with acrylic. Now there's still a few more things that I'm going to do to the cloak here. I may even add a gold pendant or something, or a cloak clasp here. I'll probably add some of that in, and then I'm going to be using that same gold up here, and then you'll watch me outline it in black, and then you'll watch me shade it. But the most important things are how to paint with gold. Now, let's go over a couple of basics with acrylic real quick. First of all, acrylic generally is either going to be very opaque or very transparent, and you want to find out what that is on the back of your tubes of paint. You'll find a spot right there where it says opaque. This one is half and half, all right? So this is halfway between. And then if we go and we look at another one, let's pick out, this one, very opaque, okay? That's your burnt sienna. This is important. What you need to know is how to paint, how to get it done. I'm not particularly happy with the way this guy's face is turning out, but I've spent enough time on the painting that I just want to get it done and move on, so I'm not going to spend any more time up here. I'm just going to spend some time on the hair, mostly on the swords, and then on the background. And then I'm going to spend the time to show you what it's like to get everything to kind of be, well, your background needs to be able to focus here and not up in your corners. And the way that we do that is with our Payne's Gray and with the large makeup brushes. But let's get to what we're using today. We're not going to be using the giant brushes on these today. We're going to be using this little fine brush. We're going to be using this one right here, my little flat oval. That's going to be for my shading. This makeup brush we're going to be using, and then this little teeny chisel brush. Those are the brushes we're going to be using. So let's jump straight into it. There's not going to be a lot of narration as I go along, unless I get some comments. I'll be watching for those. We'll see what happens. Now, I've already mixed up, first of all, some mid-tone for my gold. And if you've ever watched me do a portrait, I like to start with a mid-tone, and then I'll add my highlights and my shadows off of there. We're going to do the exact same thing here. And Sister229, hi, thanks for tuning in. Again, what we're doing today is we're going to learn how to paint gold using acrylic. Now, I've gone ahead and I've mixed up a little bit. I'm going to start with this little brush right here, and I'm going to give you guys a little play-by-play as we go. Now, in order to paint with acrylic, you have to understand that you're layering, layering, layering. You're going to be layering in all kinds of different directions. I've already given myself a little bit of a mid-tone and a little bit of my shadow here. We're going to work off of that, create all of the medium tones in between it, and then create some really bright and vibrant highlights. That's how you're going to get the depth of color. And thank you, I appreciate that. The painting is as it is. I am a little unhappy with how his face sits, but I paint for a living, and if you spend too much time on a painting, you can't sell it for enough money. And in this case, since I do paint for a living, I always have to keep an eye on how much time I spend on my painting. I'm not quite done with parts of the cloak here. I am going to add a clasp in here, probably a gold one since we're already working with gold. All right, now let's just jump right into it. I've gone ahead and I've mixed up some titanium white. I've got a little bit of burnt sienna, some transparent burnt umber, and I have some yellow ochre. And that's how I've made my gold tone. So we're going to jump down here. We're just going to cover over some spots that I already think that I need to get to. And if I don't like the way that it pops in, I can always add to that later. That's all we need to do to add extra gold tone there for the mid-tone. I'm going to jump to a highlight. And I'm just going to start doing wet on wet for a highlight. Now my highlight, if I don't feel like it's popping in and showing up as well as I want it to, I'm going to go ahead and let that part dry, and then I'll jump over here. So let's do that right now. I'm going to use this same little teeny brush right now for these highlights over here. And I'm just going to pull them in. You guys may not be able to see the depth of color change inside the camera, because you know cameras don't pick up every color. As much as we'd like them to be just like the human eye, they're not quite there yet. I'm going to go straight to some titanium white. I want you guys to be able to see the contrast differences as I go along. So I'll break some of my own rules in painting for the sake of the demonstration. Now, one thing I do want to point out is how light is traveling here. Light's traveling here. And since it's up here and traveling here, this side of this sword hilt is going to have light on it, and this will be the dark side. And then this one seems opposite, and it would seem that that's not quite right. That is the way that light travels. And if you want to know how to make a painting look right, make sure you know how light travels. Okay, here's some titanium white that we're going in. We're just adding it as touches right across the top. And then we're going to switch straight over to a mixture of our darker tones. Now these darker tones are going to give you a lot more to your gold. In this case, instead of doing a blue gold or a white gold, I'm going with a brown gold tone. There's plenty of those. If any of you out there are jewelers, you're going to be able to know and see what the differences and the change of the colors are. If you're not a jeweler and you want to learn exactly what kind of tones there are, go in and speak to a jeweler. They're more than happy to talk to you about how and what everything looks like. Oh, and real quick, I want to know, can everybody hear me okay? I'm using a new headset. I'll wait to get an answer on that. While I'm just picking some colors in there. Yes, you can hear me okay. Not too many highs or lows. Great. Now, these are all midtones right here. Only our white is our highlight. So how do we get it to smooth? How do we get it to really kind of bring itself into the right spot? Well, you're going to want to take some absolute permanent black and mix it with your midtone, and then bring in a little bit of Payne's Gray. Payne's Gray is one of these mixing mediums that's fantastic. It does so many cool things, it's ridiculous. It will mix and work very well with all of your background colors. And you can see if the camera's picking it up, I've got a really nice, rich, kind of brown black going on. And you've got a look here of some hammered or dulcimered gold hilting. But I don't want it that way, so I'm going to take this brush in. This is my round oval. It's an old brush, which means it's got a lot of separation to it. I like that because it gives me a really nice drag. And I'm just going to use that to smooth all of the colors I've already got on my sword hilt. And you're like, well, gosh, you just took out all of your highlight. Well, for right now I did, but that's the great thing about throwing things in later. You can throw your highlight in right over top of that, and I can bring in some really dark, fine lines, and that will delineate everything. So no matter what it is that I go over top of, I don't really worry about it because I'm going to change it over time. And you can see that that creates a real nice smoothness. That's got to dry before I do anything else to it. Can't see what you're painting now. Oh, there it is. Sorry. Okay. Sounds great, Melissa. Okay. Okay, and again, what we've got on here right now is kind of a brown black. I want that, especially up here. This is going to get more light. That's going to get less light. So I want this up here to take over some of these midtones. And then I want to clean the brush off and use it as kind of a wet mixing brush. And I'll just go on it. You're going to watch the canvas just kind of mix right ahead of you. You can see it happen right before your eyes. That's a great thing. Now, if you really know how light travels, you can say, well, this is a little bit darker here. It should be darker than that. We will darken it up over time. I have to let the layers get in there first, and then I go over top of it with a semi-transparent color. In this case, it'll be my Payne's Gray, and that'll darken these areas and get me just the right shadow that will actually come across this line right here. So that entire line from there all the way over will be completely shadow, and only this will carry some highlight in it, and it'll be lower highlight than this. That's important because you have to know, as I've said, how light travels. I'm just going to dip straight into some permanent black and just touch up some spots on the back side of this. I don't want it to be super, super dark yet. I want it to be semi-transparent, so I'm making it thin. That thinness is going to work out in my favor. And then I'm going to just drop that away and go back to my really fine point brush. Now my fine point brush, I'll show you guys, that's this one here. I've got to get ready for work, but I love your painting. Hey, thank you, Melissa. You have a great day, okay? Okay. We're just going to go with the fine point one. I'm going to dip straight into permanent black, and I'm going to get it really thick this time. A little bit beyond the consistency of ink. And I'm going to show you guys something important. This is beyond important. Take your fingers and pull from the ferrule all the way down any of that extra water that's gotten in there and get rid of it. Otherwise, when you're holding it like this, it's going to just drip down and then it'll make everything really wet. I've got a bit too much on there. I'm just going to take and roll my brush there until I have a fine point. And then I'm going to use the fine point to delineate my lines right down here. And you'll know real fast whether or not it's too wet. If it's too wet, still for the paint that's on there, it's not going to give you the lines. You want to bring that hard line all the way around on the inside here. And I'll show you why when we put in the highlights. And you want your hard lines here all the way to the edge. And then if you've got any kind of texture, you're going to put that in. In this case, I'm not going to worry about putting a texture line as though it's leather wrapped because I'm going to have it gold all the way through to the end. I'm going to let that dry and pop back up to this one. I'm going to get straight into my highlight of white again. I'm just going to remind myself of where my spots are. And I want to pull them all the way down. And then I'm going to get this brush right here. Now this is a flat chisel brush. Do you see that? This one's good for specific purposes. I'm going to get into my Payne's Gray. And I told you guys earlier about this shadow right here. That shadow line's important because that's the way the light would travel on it. I'm going to use that same Payne's Gray through here. I'm going to tighten up my line along the back. And that little bit of black that I put underneath it is now helping the Payne's Gray sit on top of it. Even though Payne's Gray is a mostly transparent paint. But it's going to work with whatever's underneath it. And because it's going to work with whatever's underneath it, it's going to give you texture as well. We'll bring that down. That line looks really nice. We're going to use the same chisel brush to get that fine line there. I like the refracted light and reflected light along the back of this, but I do want a hard line right here. And if it's too much of a hard line, you'll mix it with another brush in a minute. But right now, let's take this is another highlight, but it's a medium highlight instead of our straight white. And I'm going to use that to add a depth of color in here that most people will forget. These changes in depth of color are important because the human eye picks up on them. My brightest highlight on this is only going to be right there. Down here, it's not going to be as bright. And I'm going to change it as we go along anyway. But let's get back to this color. Now, this one right here, what we have here is burnt sienna, transparent burnt umber, a little bit of yellow ochre, and a little bit of titanium white. And that gives us a real nice brown mid-tone for our gold. As I stated earlier, what you want to do is, if you don't understand the different tones of gold, do a little research, go talk to a jeweler, you'll find out that there's yellow gold, white gold, there's blue tinged gold, and in this case, it's kind of a brown gold. Why? Because, well, we're operating under the idea that they did not have great ways of refining gold at the time that this guy was made. And he kind of has a medieval look to him, so that would be accurate. I'm going to get that brown gold in there. I'm going to just kind of pull it in different areas and then watch this. It looks hammered at this point. So how do you end up making it smooth out? Well, I'm going to use this brush again. This is one of my favorite brushes. It's been with me for about 3 seasons. You can see it's brutalized and separated. It's really soft, and that gives me the opportunity to use it as a mixing brush right on canvas. And it'll soften everything right on the canvas for us. And it doesn't matter if I lose some of these lines, because I'll just go through with a hard black later, and I will make a more delineated surface. And we're getting a nice smooth mix. There's a color right in there that I'll need to go in and fix later on. That's okay, I have that planned out. I'm going to drag that up into my dark Payne's gray there so that I get a transition. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'll fix this area a little bit more later. I'm not happy with the way it's sitting. And I'll come down here and get some of this put in here as well. And we're almost done with the bottom hilt. The only other things I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same gold colors for these lines back here, and then I'm going to take some Payne's Gray and a giant makeup brush, and I'm going to darken up my background so that I have this transition to where he's focused at. Because in this case, I want the halo effect. There's plenty of him in my composition that's going off the page, which is important. You don't want every painting to just be right there in the center. We call that a bad halo effect. If I'm creating a halo effect on the background to bring this in, that's a good halo effect. And what I will use is I will use Payne's Gray and a giant makeup brush, like this one, to get that to fade in. Once I'm done with these and these areas are dry, you guys will be able to see that. This is not going to be one of my longer paintings, so I'm not going to be here for an hour or two. I should be able to finish this up in just another 20 minutes with you guys on. So you guys get to see it come to the absolute last part of it and finishing it up. We're going to switch to some delineation. We're going with this brush right here. I've already got a little bit of that black up here as well. I'm just going to take and roll it. And that'll bring me to a very, very fine point. And then I want to use that fine point for some ultra dark lines. Now you'll have artists that'll say, don't do an ultra dark line. Well, in this case, I want it, but I'm going to change it later where I take the dark lines out with some highlights on the forward edge. And that's okay. And while I'm at it, I'm just going to darken that entire area up and then move it right into my cloak. That way I've got the contrast right on the edge of this hilt, which is perfect. I'll pop a little bit more in there. Okay. Now you see we've got our lines. This is already dry. Now we're just going to go straight titanium white. Absolute 100% straight titanium white. We're going to thin it out just an itty bitty bit. And these highlights are important. The light is going to hit right here more than anything else. It's going to have a secondary roll right around here. It's not going to hardly hit this at all because this is mostly underneath it, so we just have to worry about the secondary. And then I'm just going to give it some dabbled lines there. Move over to my mixing brush, and I'm going to soften those. And if it feels like I got some in a little bit of a wrong spot, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to clean that brush off. And I'm just going to fade that out. And that works. And I'm now mostly happy with it. Let me get a little bit more right here on a leading edge. And there. Maybe we have just a touch of this area that's picking up some light because it is rounded. And that's it. I might add a little bit more gold right through there, but I'm mostly happy with that one. Let's go ahead and get our leading edge here that has a lot more light that hits it. And it's okay that it covers over some of those black lines. That's important anyway. And maybe a secondary right there. Very important that this entire area gets heavy, heavy, heavy along it. We'll bring that line down. And then right here. And then just a touch here. There's not going to be as much of a highlight in there. Now, I am going to go ahead and get rid of some of that. I'm not happy with the way that that put in. So I'm going to mix it a little bit. And then I'm going to get a little bit more yellow for my gold and put it through there. And we're mostly done with that section now. Gold, 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 just a touch here and there. Maybe our mid-tone gold to have a little more yellow and brown show up. There we go. And then use your brush here, mix it right on the canvas. And I'm pretty happy with that, except I think I want a little bit more of that brown in there again, because that brown really adds a depth of color that allows your viewer to see more. Get your paint on both sides of your brush, because as you're going along wet on wet, it's going to pick it up a little bit. So that's when you switch to the other side of your brush, so that you don't pick up too much. And we're going to dapple it a little, dapple, and then mix it again. This brush has got to be cleaned. There we go. Now, we're going to call that part of the sword hilt done. There you have gold. Down here, less light, more of our mid-tone. Maybe go over top of that just a little bit. And here, we're just using that kind of brown gold color that I had mixed up, which was burnt sienna, transparent burnt umber, yellow ochre, and titanium white. And of course, you mix it in the amounts so that you get more of a brown instead of... It's the same way that we mixed up our medium tone for our highlights. But there we go. All right, that is how to mix gold. Now, what am I going to do with these lines? Well, I'm glad you asked. Aren't you glad you asked? I'm glad you asked. Let's jump in and get some lines. By the way, if you have not already, please like and subscribe so that I know you guys are out there. Take a look at the descriptions. If you want to be able to order a 16 by 20 canvas wrapped print of just the outline so that you guys can paint this at home, those are only $100, and then you can end up painting it along at home. You can order it to me. Now, you have to be within the lower 48 states for that to get to you, because that includes all of the shipping. If you're in Alaska and Hawaii, I'm sorry, guys, I won't ship to you. It's too much of a liability. All right, we're just going to get straight titanium white. We're going to mix it out a little bit thin. And then I'm going to add my gold color to it. I'm going to use this same really small brush that I started with. I'm going to start working on my background colors. First thing I'm going to do is put it up here and roll it until I've got a fine point. And I'm going to come straight over top of the white. And you might ask, well, if you're going to come straight over top of the white, why didn't you do it with that color in the first place? That's an easy answer. This is a mostly transparent mix. So since it's a mostly transparent mix, it would not have shown up hardly at all. And if it doesn't show up hardly at all, well, what's the point in doing it? And we're going to get that. I'm going to switch over to some straight black to show you guys why this is mixed the way it is and why I go over with it and how I make it show up. It's real simple. Get my black, pull it to a point, then I'm going to come across this inside edge and cover over some of my white. I want it to just barely show up there. I want it to be rather thin. Remember, grab any extra water and get it off of that brush. Otherwise, it'll really mess up these lines. Then I have to decide, am I going to go on the top or the bottom? In this case, I'm going on the bottom of this line. And where it intersects, I'm not going to cover over it. I'm pivoting on my canvas so that I can get my line nice and smooth. So I'm using the canvas as my pivot, just like it's some kind of a compass. Not the compass that points north, the kind of artistic compass to draw circles, guys. And there's no cheat for this. You just have to be able to learn exactly how to get this fine and go over it smoothly. Because if you don't, it won't work. And again, you have to lay down that white first, or else you'll never have it. It just won't shine. When I'm done with this, in order to make this show up really vibrant, I'm going to take this stuff that's already dry, and I'm going to mix up a yellow orange, and then I'll just put little spots where it's shining highlight through it. In fact, that's dry. Let's just show you what that looks like real quick, because some of you may not show up for the rest of the painting. So we'll mix up some orange and some yellow and a little bit of titanium white. And we want to go with that same idea of the yellow gold highlight, but we want to make this one a little bit more orange instead of just straight yellow, because it's got to show up as vibrant little lines. Now, we've got it. Clean off the brush, bring it to a point, and then let's just bring it in here. So we'll bring it there, and then where it crosses, this is way vibrant. Line, line, dash it out. And this gives us kind of a shine to our spell circles and our spells. And I don't care if it goes on heavier, because that mix is pretty transparent as well. Gives you an idea of how the shine shows up though, okay? All right, let's jump back into what we were doing. I'm going to grab this color again and just start bringing it in. This line, when I painted it, ended up a little heavier than I like. That's okay. I'm going to use a lot of the black in order to get rid of that. We're just going to keep on going with it. It's okay. I don't have anyone watching right now anyway, so you guys on the recording get to, well, kind of see it as it goes. Now, again, if you haven't already liked and subscribed, please do. If you would like to end up following along in a painting of your own, you can order the outline on a box canvas from me. The outline of this is 16 by 20, and that outline gives you the opportunity to paint this at home. That's right. You could end up painting it yourself, having a lot of fun, following along with one of the other videos that I created. Okay, again, the reason that we go over top of the white is without the white there, this transparent mix would not show up. And this is the idea of using all those layering techniques that you have in acrylic painting. Come over top of it, and again, come over top of there. And if it gets to a point where you don't have any more on your tip, just kind of draw out what you have, and then you'll get it on your tip. Remember, when you're doing that, round your brush. That will give you a nice, even, fine point. If you don't round your brush, it'll end up too heavy. Okay. All right. Now, again, we're doing the same thing to get this up here, but you say, hey, that's not quite vibrant enough. Well, guess what? You can just dip into some solid titanium white, get it on your brush, and you say, hey, here we go. We're going to really add that. This layer on layer on layer for your spells is something that gives you the look of extra. I could have just as easily have done this entire background in a green to give it that eldritch look, which that's okay. You know, a lot of people take a look at that bright blue or green and they think that's a great spell. In this case, I'm just going along with the gold because that's what the title of this particular painting is how to paint gold using acrylic. And there's a lot of layering to it. Lots of layering that needs to go on. Okay. I use just a little teeny bit of black for an outline. And I'm going to do that to the spells here too. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to pull it so that it comes to a line. And then I'm going to make sure there's no excess water on there. That will ruin everything you're trying to do. And we will just pop it in there. Here we go. I don't want a hard line on every part of the spell, just some of them. The bottom here has a hard line on it. You have to have an idea of where your light comes from, because this is just like if you were putting bevels on any kind of writing. Well, where's the bevel side? That's all you have to remember here. Okay, now I'm going to bring this one all the way down. And this is where I'm going to use it to fix some of this thickness. I'm going to use the black to go over the inside edge. And it's going to give it a thick bevel. That thick bevel is a great thing. It's also going to take this and put it further behind in the spell circle. And while I've got it, I'm going to take a little bit of this black and put it over here because I'm going to fix some of this hair as well. Have it go over top on the outside. And that will give me an opportunity to make that hair come out later. All right, let's get back to what we're doing. More black. Again, roll it across the top. Again, make sure you pull out any of that water that's sitting on it. Now, this is going to be an interesting one. We've got a curve here. Well, the first part of the curve is going to have the bevel there. And then as we get to the bottom of the curve, the bevel's going to be there. Well, that's going to give us a spot in between where the bevel doesn't hit at all. And that's okay. This one's going to go to here, stop, come over to this spot, and then at the apex of my curve, I'm just going to bring a little bit there. These bevels, again, are very important to getting that three-dimensional look to your spell. And again, have an idea of how the light's moving and what direction it's coming from so that you know where your bevels belong. Again, there's no real cheat for this area. What you have to do is have a steady hand. And if you don't get a steady hand, like I've had a lot of caffeine today, you're going to have to fix it later. Use your canvas as your rotate for this, kind of your pivot. Cover over more with a dark line if you seem to have put too much white on in the first place. And that's where we stopped so far. We're going to switch back over. We're going to get more of our yellow white that we were working with to get some of these other areas real quick. Come up here, roll it until it's on the tip. That way you're not going to have a fat line, which when I sketched this on the canvas, I did end up having too much of a fat line going on. So I need to fix that with my bevels and going over top of it. I'm just going to bring this all the way through for the curve. While I'm at it, I'm going to bring this one all the way through for the curve. And again, in order to get it to look like this up here, it's going to require a lot of layering before we get to that point. If you've just tuned in and you have not already liked and subscribed, please do. And if you get to a point where you'd like to follow along this painting, I know some people out there that are like, well, I can do a better job than that. That's great. You want to order the actual sketch on a 16 by 20 on a box frame canvas so that you can paint it at home. You can order that from me at just $100, and that includes shipping as long as you're in the lower 48 states, because I will not ship to Alaska and Hawaii. It's too much of a liability. Get more of our spell circles in here. It's very important to make sure you don't have any paint on anything that's going to rest on the canvas itself. Also make sure that your paint that you're thinning out does not have too much of a darker color in it, or else it's not going to work right for you. So I'm remixing some of this. This is just thinning out what I've already got there with a little bit of titanium white. What I already have there is a mixture of, a mixture of my yellow ochre, titanium white, burnt sienna, and transparent burnt ochre. Transparent burnt umber, not ochre. This one's going to be tough because I need to make sure that I preserve that point. There's no tricks that you can use this. You have to be able to paint it as smoothly as you can using your brush tip. But you can make sure that there's no water on there, and you can roll it to the top and tip of your brush. But everything after that, guys, you have to have a delicate touch. And the reason that we ended up having this white on first is what I'm using is very transparent. It would not have shown up if the white were not underneath it. Was not, were not, I don't know. What's the proper use of grammar there? Somebody can say that in the comments. Okay. We want to get to this before we do anything else because it is down here and my hand might brush across it as we go. This layering allows you to fix any mistakes that you may have made earlier. And again, I'm using my hand as a pivot. That pivot's important because it gives you the smooth quality to what you're doing. Okay, we need to make sure that the brush has just the stuff on the very, very tip of it. So roll your brush in an area where it'll pull it all the way to the tip. And these are super fine areas down here. You want to make sure that that white's there before or it will not show up. I know I talk about the layering all the time. Layering's important. Without layering, you will not have everything show up. If you just tried to put this gold color over top, it wouldn't look right. We can give you guys an example of that up here in the corner right here, because this is going to be covered up anyway. Shows up only a little bit, shows up better if the white were under it. Now, here's a question. What if you mess up like that and you've got suddenly paint in a place that you don't want it? Take a brush, get it a little bit wet, just start pulling it out, and your paint comes off. Great way to remove paint real fast. Alrighty. This is all fine detail work through here. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no way to cheat on it. Just make sure that you're really delicate. My hand's a little bit wet. I'm going to just dry that off with my pants real quick. You don't want excess water on your canvas. Use your hand to pivot, kind of like it's the center of the compass. And there you go. Now, again, what creates some of the differences that you're looking for to make it vibrant is we're going to use a mix of some orange, and I'm going to go over the areas where it joins the most, just kind of like it's a star, right? These are the areas where it's just shining. And then that orange I'm going to go back over with a slightly different color later in my layering to really get my shine on my spell circles and on my spells. And this is just like mixing up your gold, which is what we ended up doing in these areas. So the first part of the tutorial was to show people how to do this. In fact, I can even take some of this orange and pop a little bit in on my gold. It gives me even another depth of color over here. So you can constantly layer as much as you'd like, and it'll just continue adding to what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Now, before I forget, I'm going to come up here on my spell areas, and I'm going to go over top. Make sure that your paint is loaded up on the tip of your brush. Don't use the side of your brush too much. Get more of it on the tip. If it feels like something's not smooth enough, go back over it. Smooth it out. Okay. Spells are showing up. Starting to look good. We're going to be using some Payne's Gray in the corners in order to make everything up in these corners. It's going to darken up so that I can bring the focus into the center. You guys, if you stick around till the end of the painting, you'll end up seeing all of that happen. Let's bring it to the tip. I'm going to go up here on the top first because I know my hand's going to move down. So I need to make sure that as my hand moves down, I don't brush it across any wet paint. Luckily, it's acrylic. Acrylic dries pretty darn quick. But still keep an idea of where you've painted and where you haven't. Sometimes take a moment and jump back to look at your painting. Load back up on your tip if you start getting it too much on the side. You don't want to use the side of your brush on this because you'll lose all of your delicate touch. You guys can hear my squeaky chair in the background. There we go. I haven't put my black line in on these yet, but I'm going to put the orange across it anyway. All right. Right now we're just working on the spell circles. All of the gold that we did on the hilts was done a little earlier. You guys can watch the entirety of it. If you have not already liked and subscribed, please do. And if you want to end up painting this at home and following along, you can end up doing that because I have the outline of this thing that is for sale in a print on canvas that would be 16 by 20 inches. You can take a look at the description for that. I mentioned it a few times. Because, hey, it bears repeating. Bring that across. Bring that one across. And our spell circle is going to show up nice and vibrant. Okay. All right, again, if you're tuning in to watch me do the painting on the gold, well, I ended up painting that earlier for the gold hilts. Right now I'm doing the spell circles. I'm going to end up using a layered technique to make these look more gold. Right now I'm just getting an orange yellow put in over top of things. And then I'm going to bevel it with some black lines. And if I don't like how some of the lines show up, I can constantly layer over layer over layer. That's just the way it is. If you are tuning in and I'm still live on this, please make a comment so that I can see what you're saying on it. I can answer any questions as we go along. I do enjoy being able to connect with people. Something of interest, and note, this painting is going to be going in the card game I Magi Kingdom of Thor card game. You can go and find that at imagicardgame.com. That's IMAGI cardgame.com. Just as though I am a magi. And it's a card game that I created. It's a fun tabletop card game. We have a variety of artists that are working with us in it, including the esteemed Rob Carlos and Michael Brugger, Cheyenne Crone. These are all top-end artists. Matthias Ward. All of these artists that are in it have decided to get involved with what they feel is the next great card game. And this will go on a card on it. It is a deck builder. We have about 300 cards that are out right now. And those people who get involved in the beginning are going to have the opportunity to get a lot of the really great cards. The way you build a card game is your first 2 or 3 years, you come out with all of your rare and your unique cards. And you come out with any of your limited edition ones. And then once you end up hitting year number 4, year number 4 is where you start bringing out more of your commons. It doesn't dilute it, it just gives a little bit more depth to the game. So people who get involved early, for instance, year 4 for us on iMagi Kingdom of Thor card game, year 4 would end up being 2026. So if you ended up going to imagicardgame.com, IMAGI cardgame.com, you can get one of the 234 card compendium decks for a really great deal right now. And again, every painting that I do goes onto a card. And then I've got a total of 12 artists that are working on it. And if you ever end up going to any of the conventions on the West Coast area, so if you're at RadCon, NorWestCon, WorldCon this year is going to be in Seattle. You go to any of these places, you'll be able to meet a lot of these artists. And if you have the cards, they love signing them. And they don't charge you to sign the cards, because even though these guys have made a ton of money and these other artists are incredibly well known in the industry, for instance, Rob Carlos is the guy that taught you what dragons look like, these people will still sign those cards for you for free. They just really enjoy connecting with people. We are in talks with the esteemed Todd Lockwood. We may end up getting him to create a card. And if he does, you guys definitely want to run into him and have him sign your card. Todd's a fun guy. He will be at, I don't know if he's going to be at RadCon. I know he'll be at NorWestCon. And I know he usually goes to MissCon. And I know he'll be at WorldCon. So, Todd's a fantastic guy. I am in communication with him to see if we can get a contract for a card to be created, which would be fantastic. Okay, all of the people that are artists that work with me on the card game, they enjoy working with me because as the art director on it, the way that I operate is different from any of these other card games out there. I don't create the card and then tell them what to paint. I ask them to choose something that they already have done. I take a look at it, I put it on a card, and then I make the card fit the artwork. If you're an artist out there that paints science fiction or fantasy, and you want to become an artist for the card game, you can go to the description of this of this painting. Go to the description. Boy, that was terrible. Go to the description, and then send me an email. I'll review what it is that you've got. If I like the work and I can afford you, I will license the opportunity to use just the digital portion, or a digital file, and put it on the card. Well, you know, I'm not perfect at talking and painting at the same time, so you guys will just have to deal with the fact that I was stumbling there. Alright, some people have asked, why do you have a radio voice? Well, in a different life, before I did paintings full time, I was on radio. I was a DJ. I was on a terrible time for a DJ. I ended up doing the time frame that was 1 a.m. till 5 a.m. It was awful. I have done a lot of books on tape, so if you end up listening to some horror novels or some crime thrillers, you may end up hearing my voice. And then I stopped doing that because I stopped wanting to do a lot of crime novels. Okay. We're going to dip into our permanent black, get a real nice inky consistency. Remember, grab and pull from here, drag across the top until you've got a fine point, and then you can start putting in your bevel. Your bevel needs to be really fine in some areas. Use your hand as the pivot. If you feel like you're a little shaky on it and you don't like the way that it looks, you can always go back over it later with a little bit of titanium white, and then you can always go back over with your orange yellow for the spell circle. Okay. I am a little shaky on that one, but that's okay. Had a caffeinated beverage before I started this. Maybe I should have not had that. But hey, who cares at this point? It's looking good. I like the way that it feels. That's all that matters. This painting, I'm trying to get finished so that I'm under the 6-hour mark. Anything beyond that, if you want to know about professional painting, time is of the essence. If you get beyond the 6-hour mark, you probably will be losing money. Remember where your bevel's supposed to go. Your light's coming down this way. It's okay if you mess it up a little bit, because people aren't going to be looking at one specific spot on the painting. Generally, people will be looking at the overall. And unlike some people who have to have every detail right, guess what? The overall is really what's going to matter on your painting. Because the human eye is going to fill in the gaps with their own recognition of patterns. The human eye is great at recognizing patterns, and it's going to make its own pattern on it. I'm not going to do a bevel down here. I like the way that it looks. I am going to finish up my bevel here, and here, and then along these. Now, my light's traveling from the top. I have to have my bevel come along here until I get to an apex on it, and then my bevel switches sides and comes down the bottom. Don't worry if your spell circle doesn't show up permanently in all places. It's a spell circle. Some of it's going to disappear, right? Or at least that's the lie that we tell ourselves when we're painting, because it makes us feel all warm and fuzzy at night. And that's the thing, as long as you allow your viewer to find the pattern, they will fill in the details themselves. And we need, this is the stuff that I hate doing right here. Purely horizontal lines are harder unless you tip your canvas on the edge. Now this one, I can do that, but for the sake of painting live, I'm not going to bother doing it. And anything that I feel like I mess up on, I'm going to go over and fix with my titanium white and then my orange yellow mix later. And we're almost done with this. Once I'm done outlining all this, I'm going to go in and I'm going to darken up my corners. And I'm going to give it a little bit of depth, as though there's light here, and then it rolls around to the back. Bring my line to my apex of my curve, and then switch to the bottom of the curve. Remember how light travels. Understanding how light travels is your single most important thing about any painting. Because if you don't know how light travels, you'll never be able to get your shading right. This one carries that bevel all the way on this side. There's no apex to the curve there. Again, use your hand to pivot. This is one of those things that I made a mistake on. I forgot to bevel this over here. So now I can't put my hand up here because that's wet. Because if I do, I'll end up dragging some of the stuff that I just went over. So I'm just going to work it from the outside as smoothly as I can. I'm not going to worry if it appears as though it's a little bit ragged, because I'm going to end up using some of my bright light titanium and my orange mix over top of it for my highlights. Sometimes you get so wrapped up in your painting that you forget to do some of the things that you've left behind out here. I call those orphans, and I don't like leaving orphans out there because it messes up the flow of the painting. Okay, let's get the last bits of our bevel in here, and then we'll have to work over here. Then once that dries, we can go ahead and change it. Again, if you have not already liked and subscribed, please do so. These live paintings, I need to know that there are people out there watching them, because if there's not people out there watching them, well, then why am I painting them live? Gonna get to there, we'll take the apex of the curve there. Going to draw this one down to here, change the apex of the curve out, and then this one's just going to take that the entire time. Now, that shows up nicely. Some people might say, well gosh, that's too hard of a line, it's a little too dark. That's okay, I can change it as I go along. I'm going to leave the gaps as they overlap here. I didn't do that up there, that's okay, I can change that. Sometimes you make these things up as you're going along, and you make the changes as you feel they are necessary. Be really delicate with your lines. Some of them aren't as delicate over there. Again, going back over top with the layering is what's going to fix that. If you don't feel like it's on the tip, roll it off of your canvas until you get it onto the tip. Pull your lines across nice and delicately. This bevel is what's going to make the spell circle really show up from the background. Again, horizontal lines, which I kind of hate. We're a little bit dark there. That could have been solved just by pulling like this, which is what we're going to do now. A little dark and a little thick in some areas is okay. It does make it a little bit more interesting for your viewer of your painting, because they can look at other things, but you don't want something that's left behind that's an obvious mistake. Okay? Fix it if you can. If you have to live with it, live with it. Use your fingers or your palm as your pivot. It's a little harder when you're off here Your pivot's going to be in a different spot. It's not going to work as smoothly as you'd like it to. Again, you have to decide if you're going to let your viewer fill in the details with the way that the eye works with patterns, or if you're going to get super anal retentive and end up putting in all of the detail yourself. That's a decision that only you can make. This was a little thick on the line here. I'm going to use the black to encroach upon the color, and that'll give me the final there. Now, I'm not super happy with some of these spots, so I'm going to mix up more of my orange white with a little bit of yellow, a little bit of my ochre yellow. I want it to be mostly orangey. Orangey. New word, I just made it up. Go with it. Spread it around. Live it, love it, like it. That's the way it is from here on out. Roll it at the top, and then I'm going to spot the areas that I don't really like. And I'm going to use that to smooth those areas out. And it's more vibrant. It's going to show up a little bit better now that we've got a layer upon layer upon layer. It's going to smooth out some of those black lines for me. And I'm going to come back over, there it is. We'll pull that across. And then I'll just use a bright titanium white for any super highlight areas I want. Probably actually mix it with a little bit of medium yellow. It'll kind of give me that lemon yellow feel. But yellow, especially if you're making clouds, is how you're going to make your white more vibrant. I want to cover that up. I wasn't happy with that, or that area, especially that line there. And we're more vibrant now. This is great, because if we are more vibrant, then your spells seem to show up a little bit better, right? That's good. It's also going to take some of that hard edge of your black off of it. I don't mind the hard edge of my orange-yellow mix. In fact, I like the hard edge of that as opposed to the black. It'll smooth that waverliness, and since this is kind of transparent, it's not going to show up really vibrant and make it look like it's wavering. So it's a trick, those layering tricks. I want to come back over here, do the same thing in certain areas. All right, you know what? Let's mix up some yellow. We're gonna go with medium yellow. I'm gonna put it right next to what I've got for my orange. I'm just gonna use a brush itself to mix it together to give me the color I want. And I want some titanium white, and I'm not gonna mix in any of my yellow ochre at all anymore. Just my titanium white and my medium yellow. Titanium white and medium yellow. Somebody's going to make fun of the way that I speak on here, and I'm going to say, you wish you had the voice that I've got. You wish you had the radio voice. That's right. I want to mix this a little bit thicker, so it's going to be on kind of a thick ink instead of a thin ink. Get that done, and then we'll highlight some areas. I'm going to highlight the entire line here. And that's going to show up really vibrant. This is what I talk about when I say, when you want to do your spells and you want to have them shine, layer on layer on layer on layer is how you end up getting the shine to work. And if you're not happy with it, you want it to be more vibrant, come in over top of your layer with some titanium white, and then come back over top of it with the yellow. And I can guarantee you that yellow on top of the white, since it is transparent yellow, the white will shine through underneath it, just like right there. And that white is going to make it more vibrant and look like it's shining. So your spells suddenly have a lot more depth to them. And these spell circles are an important aspect, especially where they cross over each other. Make them shine. Some of your... Just pick out little spots on your spell spots instead of the circles. Your spell circles, you want to do most of them. Give them some flares, like we'll put a real big flare right there. That's good. Now you have motion. Just the mere fact that you've got the flares on here gives you motion. Let's really make that thick and then thin it out on either side. Same thing here. There, ooh, and especially here. This is a little bit fat. Let's thin that out. Fatten that up, thin it out. Same thing. Let's do that. As though the spell's alive and it has motion going in all directions. That's a good thing. Okay. I'm going to mention it one more time. It bears mentioning all through the painting. If you have not already liked and subscribed, please do so. I want to know you guys are out there. I want to know that I'm painting for some people. I don't need to just sit here and listen to my own voice. I've already got the 12 voices in my head that are talking constantly. Why would I need any more than that? Bring it in for a join and make it vibrant. Right there. In fact, this entire line I'm going to make nice and fat. Yes. Lots of layering to make these spells work just right. And they have that motion now, right where they join. That's how you make it so that it looks like it's in constant motion. Without that heaviness in those joins, it doesn't look like you have constant motion. So let's thin that out. We've got to get more. All right. Make it on the tip of my brush. I've got a join right here. I'm going to make that one heavy all the way through. These thick and thin lines make your spells come to life. And that constant layering of the white in the background and then coming forward for the orange yellow and then coming through with the yellow yellow and then the yellow and white. All of that works together to give motion and depth to something that's truly just some flat lines, right? Well, and then right here I want it right in the center. Make that fat. And you can see it's now coming to life. It's glowing. That's what a spell's supposed to do. This is how you make it work with traditional paint. When you're working on a computer, gosh, it's almost too easy because you can use different flares and whatnot that you can't use when you're doing traditional paint. So you have to come up with your own way of getting that done. Well, this is how I do it. This is how I solved that problem. Other people have different techniques for it. This is just the one that I use. I have to make sure I'm not touching any of that wet paint. Also have to make sure I don't get my hair in the way of the camera. I want a big flare here because I've got part of my spell goes out here. So I'm going to make this really heavy and then fat, thin it all out to the point. I need a little more titanium white in my mix because I'm getting too yellow. If I don't have the titanium white and the medium yellow in equal parts, it's not going to work. Bring it up here, pull it out until I've got it on the tip of my brush. And I'm going to hit some of my spell circle. Or not spell circle, the actual spells. I'm going to thin the paint out just a little bit. And then we're going to jump back in. This layer upon layer upon layer, again, is how you end up getting your spells to come to life. It's using the same gold method that I used down here. In fact, if I decided that I wanted to make this a little bit more vibrant, I just bring in some of this as though the spell circle itself is shining right onto and is part of my light source. Boom. Just fun things that you can do. You don't have to follow a specific pattern on that. You just have to know that your layering is the most important part. And you can continue layering for the rest of the time. I could keep on working on this layering stuff over and over and over again. But sometimes you have to remember that as a professional artist, time is of the essence. And if you take too much time, you're not going to make much money off of that painting. I particularly enjoy painting for the everyday man. I like to make it so that everyone can appreciate and be able to afford one of my original paintings. So for the people that I have on YouTube who end up watching this, who are subscribed to me, you can end up ordering an original painting, an actual original painting, for just $250, and that includes your shipping as long as you're not in Alaska or Hawaii. Now, if you're in Alaska and Hawaii and you really do want to get a painting from me, I will end up selling you the painting, but you have to pay for the shipping. And that could end up being another $70 to $80. So, still a pretty good way of getting an original painting, because I know a lot of artists out there, they sell their work for $5, $6 grand. Look, if you're going to want an original from me and you subscribe and you're in the lower 48 states, $250, guys. I'm the everyday man's artist. I want you guys to be able to afford them. We've got a lot of vibrancy down here. We should end up coming up here and getting a touch more of it here. Otherwise, it looks a little unbalanced. Again, layer, layer, layer. Flares in the appropriate spots. Yeah, that looks nice. We're getting a really good mix of our medium yellow and our titanium white, and it's layering over top of that orange to make everything feel like it's moving. Let's get some down here. Thick and thin lines, they give you a little bit more movement on your canvas for your spell circles. Okay, pull it out there. I want it on the fine tip, just like I've said earlier in this painting. Now, some people will say, hey, do you use those really expensive brushes? No, I don't. Some of these brushes have been with me for 3 or 4 seasons, and they're just cheap Walmart or Target brushes. Oh, we made a mistake there. This is a great opportunity to show you guys how to get rid of a mistake. Watch this. I'm just going to brush some of it off. It looks like it's mixing on there. That's okay. Watch, it'll just come off. And then, I'm going to use my finger. Ooh, yeah. See? This is not as bad as you think. You think, oh gosh, that's a huge mistake. Nope, not really. I'm going to work it in and make it part of the shine on the canvas. And that's just by using a makeup brush. And then you fix it just like that. And if you don't like the way that works, you think, it needs a little bit more, come in with a more fluffy makeup brush and get it pulled off of your canvas. That's a great opportunity for you guys to see what happens when a potential mistake pops out. Well, now it's gone. That's one of the best things to do, guys. Get rid of it. If you think it's going to pop up like that, if you make a mistake, jump on it as fast as possible. That paint is still wet. That paint can be mixed in, or that paint can be completely removed from the canvas with just a couple of tricks. Okay, and the big thing there is I did not take and pull my brush down like this, and I also did not bring it out to a point. So, if you make your mistakes, go in and fix them. We'll just pull that same paint. You don't want to be dipping into the paint that you use up here too often because it'll get thinner and thinner and thinner. And you don't want that. Okay. Hey, look at that. Crisis averted, right? That's actually a really good thing for you guys to see so that you can see, hey, everybody makes mistakes. Don't panic about it, just go in and fix it. I really like the way that the spell circle's looking. I really like the motion I'm getting. Got some spots I want to fix a little bit more right through here. And here. Then I have the other side. I've got to fix this area right there. I'm just going to put that area in shadow. This area doesn't need anything done to it anymore. I'm going to pull a little bit of strands of hair out. But other than that, we're almost done. There is a tendency of every artist when they get close to getting done to try and rush a little bit. If you do that, you'll end up making some mistakes. Lines will end up being not as clear as you'd like them to be. So focus on slowing yourself down. Because if you don't focus on slowing yourself down, you're not going to be happy with something. Then you're going to scream and yell, and there'll be gnashing of teeth and all of that other good stuff. And oh, what the heck? Quote some Bible things or something. Call down the wrath of God. Who cares? Just have some fun with it. Okay. There we go. Big, boom, flares right up there in the corner. Because you want the motion across your spells again. Big flare, draw it out, big flare. If you have enough paint on your brush, you can just kind of make it a roller coaster where you press harder and lighten up and press harder and lighten up. That's what I'm going to do right through these areas. Press hard, lighten up, press hard, lighten up. The same through there. And here. We're almost to completion, but once we get to completion, before I decide to put on any of the stuff in the corners that's going to bring the attention to the center, I'm going to have to let it dry. Lucky for me, this stuff dries fairly quick because it's acrylic. But usually I keep a hair dryer near me. Yeah, I use a hair dryer because acrylic paint doesn't dry fast enough for me. Some people find that a little bit odd. I'm going to have to grab one before I end up going to RadCon. If you are inside the Pasco, Washington area in the middle of February, come and see me at RadCon. Let me know that you watch me on YouTube, and I will probably have a little gift for you just because you watch me on YouTube. Let's add a little yellow in here too. A little bit of yellow. It's just part of the spells that are really shining on this. There. Okay. Guess what? That's all done. So while that's drying, I'm just going to take one of my makeup brushes. I'm going to mix it in some Payne's Gray and some permanent black. I'm just going to add some shadows in different areas and bring it forward. Make sure that it hits in the appropriate spots. I don't like that brush. I want to move to a different brush instead. Permanent black, Payne's Gray. Mix it up a little thin. Go over top of those areas. I'm going to use the drag of the brush to get me in the appropriate spots for the shadows. And the drag of the brush is important. I'm going to darken up that area really nice. Go over some hair. I'll go back over top of that hair anyway. Bring in here. I'm not particularly happy with the way the guy's face turned out. That's okay. Nice thing is somebody's going to love this at one of the conventions that I go to this year. Somebody's going to buy it, or one of you guys who are on YouTube is going to buy it. And remember, if you're a subscriber to my channel, which is free, like and subscribe, it's free, you can end up getting the discounted price to pick up a painting. And that means you get it before it goes to a convention, before I end up charging more for it. And you guys have the opportunity to pick up an original for only $250. That includes the shipping if you're in the lower 48 states. Now, I had someone make fun of me the other day, and they said, there's 50 states. Yes, the lower 48 refers to things that are not Hawaii and not Alaska. Hence why they're called the lower 48 states. But Hawaii is right over that side. It's not really on the other side of things. It's not above. It doesn't matter. That's just the way they're referred to, guys. It's been one of those things that's been said from time throughout all eternity. Just go with it. Don't try to constantly be arguing. Or do. Hey, maybe if you start putting all kinds of insulting comments, just the fact that you're putting comments in ends up making it so that the algorithm shows my videos more often. So hey, you know what? I'll change my mind. Argue with me all you want. I want to hear your arguments. I want you to argue. I want you to be one of those guys that's a complete and utter jerk and says, I'm going to be smarter than you. That's great. There's lots of people smarter than me. I want you to be one of them. Argue with me in the comments. It'll be fantastic for the algorithm. Now, somebody's going to say, that's a little bit more yellow than white. Yep. I'm going to use it as this, and then I'm going to come over it with some white. I want it to shine a little bit. Or I'll just end up moving it in and adding a little more yellow in certain spots. Either way, what we're really doing is we're just trying to waste some time letting the stuff on the outside dry, the spells, so that I can go in with my Payne's Gray and my giant makeup brushes and add to it later. All right. Hey, you know what? Anybody who has been tuning in this entire time, why don't we give you guys an opportunity? If you're still there and you're watching and you're listening, give me an idea for a title. Don't know what I'm going to title this thing yet. Let's find out what we really want to title it as, okay? I could have stopped this a long time ago on these parts, but I'm just going to add to it because I want the depth of color. And I'm giving more time for everything to dry. I'm just using the makeup brushes to hit these spots. I think I need a little bit more of a highlight though. So I'm going to mix up a bit of a highlight color. Let's pull a highlight across there. That solves the problem we had there. Oh yeah, this looks nice. And I'm just using the makeup brush to apply the highlight. I like the drag that I get. It gives kind of a natural feel to the cloak. Maybe a little there, and some more here, and there, and then up along there. I'm not going with precision on this because I want the human eye to fill in the details themselves. And I'm not going to pull a bunch over here. This doesn't need a highlight. The cloak feels real nice the way that it pulls. The highlight helped out a little bit. Let's put in just a little bit more up here and there. Now, since these highlights are semi-transparent, once they dry and you go back over top of them, they will show up even more vibrant. It's one of those tricks. If I hit it with the hairdryer, if I still had a hairdryer that hadn't broken, then it would dry fast and you can go over top of it. I like painting as fast as I can. Now we're going to test something real quick. I want to find out, is all of this stuff dry? I'm just going to tap my fingers over top of it. It's dry. Guess what that means? It's time for Payne's Gray to make its appearance. And great big makeup brushes. I want my Payne's Gray to be a little bit thin, but not too thin. I'm going to start using this on the corners, and you will see what it does. It's pretty awesome watching this happen. I'm going to take the corner. I'm going to put some on pretty heavy. This brush is ever so slightly damp. And so you can see, even if it goes on heavy, you can fade it in. I want the outside circles to be kind of hidden. Same thing up here. That looks heavy, right? Well, look. You bring in that makeup brush, and this is one of the beauties about Payne's Gray, is it is a mostly transparent color for acrylic. And so when you do this, it gives you the opportunity to bring the focus into the center of the painting. And you want the spell circles to disappear a little bit. We've got a little bit of paint that showed up in a place we don't want it. Just going to get rid of it a little at a time. Just going to use a brush that's already there. It's a little bit stubborn. I must have not seen this. And it takes just a minute to get rid of it. But it does get rid of it. You just have to know that you're doing it. Maybe bring your fingernail in a little bit. I'm not going to worry about whether or not I have some thin paint that's gotten thinner. I've done enough layering on the background that I won't eat away all of my paint down to it. And the background layers have ended up drying enough that this isn't going to be an issue. And again, it's nice to see these things pop up, because then you know how to get rid of them. You want to use a soft brush. You want to have that layer of the paint come up a lot. I'm going to let that area dry a little bit. I'm going to move down here. Add a lot of this down here. I want the bottom down here to really fade in. This is one of those secrets and tricks that I've been using for ages. I'm going to do the same thing down here. It's not as noticeable down here because we're already a pretty dark color. But it does make a difference. Trust me, it makes a difference. Okay, we're going to thin out a little bit more of our Payne's Gray. Put it up here, and the nice thing is that area that we had that was a problem is going to disappear just like that. Maybe some more down here. I like the way that that works. I don't want it to be super even. And then a little more over here. Boom, guess what? Now we have taken more here. We've darkened up. The spell circles are now faded into the background. The character moves forward. And there it is. We're ready to sign the painting. To sign the painting, decide what color you want to sign your painting in. I'm going to mix up, I've got a little bit of titanium white here for my gold with some yellow in it. It's a little bit of yellow ochre. I'm going to thin it out until it's almost ink. I'm going to use a very, very fine tip brush. I'm going to pull it across the top until I get a point. And then I'm going to sign. The signature is actually my least favorite part of the painting. I have to make it almost completely uniform every time. Always load up the tip of your brush. Try to be flowing with it. We're not exactly the way I like it down here, but that's okay. We're going to live with it. And then I always put the year that I've done it in. And this is 2025. It's really funny. The first two paintings of the year I ended up marking as 2024. So, for the one person who's watching right now, you get to have a tour of the studio real quick and the gallery. So there you go. This is painting number 11 for 2025. Let's give you a tour. You ready? Let's hop out and take a look at everything that we have in the studio and the gallery. That's a lot of paintings, right? There are currently 50 paintings that are inside the gallery. The gallery is kind of a hangout spot for a lot of people. Need to clean it up right now. Any of you that were watching the whole thing, there it is. Oh, hey, Nihad. Nice to see you again. Thanks for tuning in one more time. Nihad, I'm still not sure how to say your name. So if I've messed it up, I'm sorry. But there we are. There's the tour. Watch the video in its entirety. And thank you for tuning in.